everybody, my name is Kaylee and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Okay guys, future me popping in here real quick. I just wanted to say something. There are a few trigger warnings in this story, nothing too graphic, but there is mention of suicide, domestic violence, drug use, and eating disorders. So viewer discretion is advised, and if that's not okay with you, make sure to go back and click on one of my other videos. I have plenty more story times on my channel. I'm going to bring you guys up close. There we go. Okay, so for any of you who are new here, I'm going to do my quick usual little rundown. For most of the video, I'll be looking in this direction because my mirror's over here and I would like to see what I'm doing. I do tell these story times in a first person point of view, so if you don't like that, then you can leave, and these story times are sent in by anonymous people. Okay guys, if I seem really hyper, it is because I have had 5 cups of coffee today and I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep within, no, okay, not to be dramatic, no, 7 hours of sleep within the past 2 days. Okay, so story time about how my dad made my life a living hell. It's always men, I swear. Like, I think that just like is our issue, you know? I think that's really the problem. We should fix that, or they need to fix themselves. That's what needs to happen. Okay, so a little background information. I am 15 years old and in 10th grade. Now, if anything doesn't make sense in this story time, like, it's because this took place in a different country. So that'll kind of help make it make more sense if it does not make sense. Whatever that means. It took place in a very conservative country. Okay, so this whole situation started whenever I was around 4 or 5 years old. So my parents had a really rocky relationship, most likely because of the fact that my mom was 16 and my dad was in his early 20s whenever they were forced into a marriage. And here's the icing on the cake. They're cousins. Yep, they are cousins. I already know what y'all are thinking. Yes, it's messed up. I know. Don't gotta tell me. And my mom and my dad never really got along with each other. Of course, they would argue and stuff like that, but that wasn't really the main issue in their relationship. The main issue is that my dad would go on business trips and then ghost my mother for months. And then whenever he would get home, he would barely speak to her. I could see how that could cause some issues in a relationship. Just a little bit, just a little bit. I don't know if I said this earlier, guys, but if I seem very hyper, I think I already said this. I've had 4 cups of coffee and I feel like I'm bouncing off the fucking walls. Anyways, back to the story. So this caused my mother to accuse my dad of cheating, as she should, because why else would you be ghosting me, your wife, who you are married to? And my mom's family, as well as my father's, played a big role in screwing up their relationship. Well, since as long as I can remember, I have been a daddy's girl. Except I was low-key a little bit toxic when I was a child because I was like obsessed and possessive over him. Meaning, if he would go out even for just a few hours, I would get sick with a fever and I would refuse to eat. Like, I would literally starve myself until he came home. I would say that that's out of the ordinary, but low-key my little sister does that. Just coming out the womb toxic as fuck. Now, my grandma on my dad's side, she lived with us, okay? So it was my mom, my dad, my grandma, and I. And my dad, like any son, he loved his mother. Like, absolutely loved her a lot. The both of them were inseparable. He was the definition of a mommy's boy, okay? Now, even though my grandmother got my mom married to my dad, she hated her. Like, my grandma, she literally despised my mother. This is just my opinion, you know, because I love to give my opinion whenever nobody asks. There are some moms out there who have weird obsessions with their sons. And I think I've actually mentioned this before, to be honest. I think we've talked about this before. How it doesn't matter if a girl is literally perfect, they will always have an issue with any of their son's girlfriends. It doesn't matter. You could literally be perfect. Like, for example, one of my friends is dating this one guy and his mom despises her because her son, like any other normal boyfriend, he wants to spend time with his girlfriend, not his mother, his girlfriend. It's like an emotional attachment, incest thing that these moms create with their sons. And no, I'm not talking incest like that, okay, gross. I just mean that they have like a mental relationship that you would have with a significant other towards their son. It's weird. I don't know. Okay, anyways, back to the story. So anyways, back to the story. Like I was saying, my grandma despised my mother. She freaking hated her. Even though my mom would literally do anything for my grandma. No questions asked. Even though my grandma would literally make her life a living hell. Like, for example, whenever my dad would come home from work, from a long day of work, he does not want to deal with anybody's bullshit. What does my grandma do? She has the nerve to say that my mom pretty much starved her all day and made her do all the housework. Literally just out of nowhere, she would be like, oh yeah, she pretty much starved me. Yep, she made me clean the whole house. Like, what the F? I'm sorry, but at that point, I'm kicking my mother-in-law to the curb. And if my husband feels that bad about it, he can be kicked to the curb too. Goodbye. Peace. See you later. So like I was saying, you know, she would say this, but that wasn't the case at all. Not at all. My mom would always take my grandma shopping. They would go to the food court. My mom would go and get her food from anywhere she wanted and whatnot. Well, of course, my grandma was lying, and in a result of this, my dad would start yelling at my mother, and my grandma just thought it was freaking hilarious. Yep, no, I'm sending her to a nursing home, and that's that. Sis should have been sent to a nursing home. Sorry, not sorry. So like I said, my dad would yell at my mom, and now looking back at this, I feel extremely bad for my mom. Like, my mom is such a strong person for the shit that they put her through and that she actually put up with. But at this time, I loved my grandma and my dad more than life itself, and I thought that they could do no wrong in my eyes. So yeah, I never thought that there was an issue with the way that they treated my mother. I feel like low-key, whenever I was younger, my family members used to treat certain family members so badly, and obviously as a child, I never saw anything wrong with it because majority rules type of thing. You know, if everybody's going at one person, you know, you're gonna be on their side whenever you're super young and impressionable. But it's just that now that I'm older, looking back on those situations and scenarios, like, that stuff makes me so sad, and I just feel so bad. It's crazy the things that you realize whenever you're an adult versus whenever you're a child. Like, when you look back, you're like, oh shit, that was actually kind of fucked up. Anyway, so I have changed probably a total of 12 schools, and I have lived in every Providence state in my country because my dad was always moving us around. Well, fast forward a little bit, my little sister's born. Now, her and I were about 4 years apart, but the moment my mom popped her out, I hated her. I really did. I had a lot of hatred towards her because I felt like my spotlight would be stolen. Now, I know I sound like a brat, but hear me out. The worst part is these weren't even my own feelings. I did not create these feelings on my own. I didn't put this into my head on my own. It was our own grandma who put these feelings into my heart, and we're gonna call my sister Rory. So right around the time that Rory was born, I was about 4 or 5, and my grandma would always say things like, your mother doesn't love you. Everyone can see that when your mom looks at Rory, she really loves her. Your mom will never look at you that way. Like, what the fuck? The audacity of this woman. Nope. After this, she definitely would have been kicked to the curb or put in a nursing home. Absolutely not. But yeah, she would say that and a bunch of other bullshit. So obviously, her telling me all these things, I start developing a hatred for my little sister and my mom. And I lived with my mom up until I was about 10 years old. And when my parents decided to get a divorce, I ended up staying with my mom, which in the end ended up being a bad decision because she was in a really bad state of depression at this point. She would rarely get out of bed. She wouldn't eat. She would barely take care of herself. And while she was failing to take care of herself, she also was failing to take care of my sister and I. My sister and I had nobody there to help us out. So of course, I have to take on the role of being a mother. I would get my sister and I dressed in the morning. I would feed us both. I would put her to sleep at night. All while my mom's in a state of depression. My mom and my dad are arguing 24/7. Now, even though I would do all this, I still never felt that sisterly bond / love. Now, while I was living with my mom, my dad would get me on the weekends, and every weekend we would go out to eat, and he would buy me pretty much anything that I wanted. But of course, there was a catch. He would literally use me to get information about my mom, to see what she was doing, where she was, who she might have been seeing. And just an FYI, like I said earlier, we live in a very conservative place, meaning guy friends and stuff like that, you know, like anything that really has to do with men, was not, quote, appreciated. Whatever the hell that means. Like, a woman would be considered a whore if she had guy friends or if she hung around guys who weren't her significant other. So anyways, like I said, he would use me to get this information about her, and by use, I also mean manipulate. He would do it in a way where It seemed as if I was telling him these things about my mom just because, without him really asking me to. And in doing these things, he would create more feelings of hatred towards my mother and my sister and I, if that makes sense. And it was really easy to create these feelings in general because, like I said earlier, my mom was not in a good state of mind at all. So of course she would usually take her frustration out on me, meaning she would scream at me, argue with me, sometimes even get physically abusive. Now, of course, me being a daddy's girl and just a child in general, I would confide in my dad about these things. Now, younger me didn't realize that I was low-key getting it just as bad on both ends, not just from my mom but my dad as well, because, well, I just didn't realize that my dad was mentally fucking me up. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then, of course, like I just said about my mom, mentally and physically abusive. Well, the one day, my dad takes me to his house, and while I am there, I get a chance to meet his fiance, who we're gonna call Anne, and she was honestly amazing. The sweetest thing, she was kind and nurturing, and because of this, I got attached to her very quickly. The main reason being, I had always longed for that mother-daughter type of love/bond. So yeah, I kind of looked at her as a mother figure, because she also would treat me like her daughter. Now, everything happened extremely quickly. Literally within the month of my parents getting divorced, my dad got married. Now, I felt terrible whenever this happened because, of course, like I said before, my mom was extremely depressed, like very, 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 very depressed. And then I was the icing on top of the cake. I definitely sent her into an even worse depression than she was already in, because I told my mother that I wanted to move in with my dad, and she was absolutely heartbroken. Even though it was kind of for my sake and her sake, because my thing is like, she could barely take care of her children. I was taking care of my sister and I. Nobody's mental health in that house. Nobody was mentally stable in that house, okay? But yeah, like I said, she was obviously heartbroken, and I still remember her exact words that she said to me on the day that I left. She said, "You're gonna come back one day. You probably think that you won't, but you will." And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is sis talking about? Because living with my dad could not be any worse than living with her. Like, my younger self had no plans whatsoever of moving back with her, for good reason. Well, I finally went to go and live with my dad, and whenever I walked into our house, I was a little bit shocked and repulsed. Now, when I tell you guys that my dad is a billionaire, I say that without hesitation or exaggeration. But he refuses to spend his money, and he's very, very, very cheap. Very cheap. Which definitely isn't a bad thing, because you know that is most likely what got him to where he is now. But the new house was just not the type of house that I was expecting us to live in. The walls were filthy. They were stained brown and yellow. It was like a freaking bug cemetery. It was absolutely disgusting. There were dead flies and moths all around the windowsills, piles of dead bugs on the floor. Like, when I tell you, it looked like somebody went in there and just like brought a can of bug spray and murdered all of the bugs, and then just decided not to clean them up off the floor after. Like, I was stepping on flies every step that I took. So yeah, it was very disgusting, and I'm gonna save you guys by not telling you how disgusting the kitchen was. But just know that I lost my appetite for like a week after seeing how disgusting the kitchen was. But of course, I decided not to let this bother me, because as disgusting as it was, I loved my dad so much, and I would have moved into a dumpster if he told me that's where we were living, as long as I could live with him. Couldn't be me. Now, of course, up until my mother fell into her depression, she would keep me well fed, well dressed. I mean, actually, even after she was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, she still made sure that there was food in the fridge, so that way, even when she wasn't cooking, we wouldn't starve to death. I also had the nicest shoes and the nicest clothes until I went to go and live with my dad. Now, I know that it might seem like I'm being a brat, okay, but you have to understand that it is hard to pick up and leave a lifestyle that you are used to living, especially whenever it just drastically changes. This also affected me more because I was a child. As an adult, you can adapt to things more fluently, if that makes any sense at all. You can adapt to things easier. So yeah, that was a very hard adjustment for me. Now fast forward, after a year of living with my dad, things were going great compared to how they were going at my mom. Like, things weren't perfect, but it was livable, it was doable. But anyways, like I said, so after a year, my dad and Anne had a child together. And after my half-sister was born, Anne's attitude towards me completely changed. Like, she got up, did a complete 180. Like, for example, my dad would go on these business trips, as I said before, and okay, yes, I know I look like George Washington. Let's get back into the story. And my dad's wife, his new wife, Anne, her attitude towards me just completely changed. Like, she did a full 180. So my dad would go on these business trips, right? And of course, in doing this, he will have to leave her and I alone together at the house, which never would have been an issue before. But this time, whenever he was away, she would refuse to talk to me. Literally, she would not say one word to me. She would not even acknowledge me. Like, I felt like I was invisible. And listen, it's not like I was 15 years old and could fend for myself. No, I was literally only around 11 or 12 years old. And like most children at that age, I did not know how to turn the stove on because I was trying to make myself something to eat. So she's sitting at the kitchen table while I'm trying to figure out how to put this stove on, and I end up burning myself. Saw that one coming. And obviously I'm low-key in pain. Like, it wasn't too bad, but I was still, you know, like, ow, that really hurt. And she looks at me and literally just stared at me and didn't say anything. And then after a few seconds, she literally gets up from the table and just walks away and goes into her and my dad's bedroom. Like, sis really did not give two F's about what happened to me. Like, I could have unalived myself and she would have been dancing on my grave. So anyways, once again, I am left on my own without a mother figure, or pretty much without anybody at that point. So like I said, now this meant that I was on my own again, of course, pretty much fending for myself. So first of all, I didn't know how to properly bathe myself, and I know you guys are probably thinking, how do you not know how to bathe yourself? I mean, like, I don't know what I mean. It just means what it means, okay? Okay. Eventually I started to mature and I had to teach myself how to wear a bra, what kind of bras fit my body type, you know, are they comfortable, how to tell if something, everything else. I also, I mean, TMI a little bit, but when I got my first period, that was a whole nother thing in and of itself. Like, I had no idea how to put a tampon in, how to use pads or anything else like that, what to do if I was having cramps. And like I said, Anne wasn't doing anything to help me. Why would she? If she's with my father, she definitely has some screws loose as well. Now, as a result of the neglect, I eventually became afraid to come out of my room. Like, most of my days were spent in my room. I wouldn't eat. And yeah, to be quite honest, my life was miserable. My day-to-day life was wake up, go to school, come home, go to sleep. On repeat. Nothing ever changed. So yeah, I would spend the night by myself. And at this point, fast forward, I stopped eating food completely. Like, I just never had an appetite. I was depressed. I feel like every time that I'm depressed, I'm on like some sort of diet because I'll lose an immense amount of weight, which is not good. It's actually quite scary. Anyway, so my dad, it got to the point where he would force feed me because, well, he would also threaten to send me away if I didn't eat. Mainly because I would pass out in school from starvation, the lack of nutrients that my body was getting. And in the mix of this, I also developed insomnia. And I developed this over time due to how bad my anxiety was and how stressed out that I was every single day. It was literally just one thing on top of another. I was failing my grades because I would fall asleep in class. In all honesty, I was hanging on by a thread at this point. All literally while being in 8th grade. Oh, and if I didn't mention it, earlier in my childhood, I was diagnosed with anxiety in my early childhood. So I didn't all of a sudden just develop anxiety out of nowhere. Everybody knew that I had that, but it was getting very worse. But yeah, my anxiety was just getting way worse, and my dad did not believe in mental health issues, even though he literally tried to unalive himself when my mom and him were still together. He must have really hated that woman, like, what the F? You know, I remember whenever I was younger and I told my dad that I felt depressed, his response was literally, okay, well, I'm depressed that I gotta go up and go to work every day, but you don't see me complaining about it. And after that, I never told him that I was depressed ever again. Like, damn, I just said that I was depressed. Anyway, so back to the story time. Because I said that I had anxiety, my dad thought to cure this, I should clean the car or I should clean the outside of the house in order to kick the anxiety out of me. I don't think that's how that works, dude. I really don't. Like, if anything, you just made my shit worse. Thank you. That just added on like 10 more years of therapy. Now, fast forward, whenever I was 14, I was given my own phone. And of course, as many of you have already guessed, no, I was not allowed to have social media. Mainly because my dad thought that this would lead me to talk to boys. And he thought that it was inappropriate for boys and girls my age to mingle. Whatever the fuck that means. So fast forward to whenever I turned 15, I am in a relationship with this boy, and he was literally probably the most toxic person that you could ever meet in your entire life. Like, this guy literally tried to convince me that I was too mentally unstable, which in some aspects he is right, but yeah. But yeah, he was like, oh, like, you're too mentally unstable, you need to go see a psychiatrist, da-da-da-da-da. But his main goal was to just get me on prescription drugs. And I guess he wanted me to get addicted to them. I don't know why, don't ask me. But no matter what I did, I could not get addicted to my meds, which is a good thing. So eventually I started talking to my mom again, and we're making plans for me to come back home because it was getting to a point where I could not mentally handle my dad's house and everybody in it. My dad would give me $30 a month, and with that I had to buy my own food. Literally buy my own food, and you all know how expensive groceries are. I had to find a way to pay for clothes, shoes, food, and anything else I needed with $30. And I couldn't get a part-time job because that's not a thing where I live. Like, if we're out and I get something, we'll come home and he'll be like, okay, go get my money. And I'm like, I wouldn't have got that if you were gonna make me pay you back with the only $30 that I get a month. Well, very randomly one day, my dad told me to give him my phone. So now that my dad wants my phone, I am doing everything I can to try and erase everything off that phone before I give it to him, because I had a bunch of shit on there that I knew I was not supposed to have. So I went through and I erased everything out of my phone. Well, at least I thought that I did. But being in such a rush, I forgot to delete the pictures of my boyfriend and I holding hands and pictures of me with my guy friends. Y'all, I remember the stress of this. Oh my god, this literally brings back memories to whenever my stepmom would come into my room at the most random times and just ask to check my phone. She'd be like, give me your phone. Right then and there. There was no, oh, hold on, give me a second, I need to do this. No. Nope, she needed it right then and there. It literally got to a point where in the morning and at the end of the night, I would go through my phone and I would hide everything that she was not supposed to see. Every single little thing. To be honest, I actually used to try and not use my phone in front of her because it's like as soon as she saw my phone, that was a trigger for her. Or like alarm bells went off on her head. Oh, check her phone, check her phone. Anyway, so my dad and I are on the way to my school, and he would usually drop me off at school, so this wasn't anything new. And then when he took my phone, he ended up seeing the pictures of my boyfriend and I and me with my guy friends, and he just looked at me. And he did not say one thing. I was freaking terrified, literally shitting bricks, because I'm like, oh god, what is about to happen? What did I do? And then he literally just slapped me again and again and again and again. This wasn't just like a, no. So then he stopped the car and he's like, have you fucked him? Now my dad is a very religious man. And of course with the reaction of him literally just seeing a picture of me holding hands with a guy, I denied it because also I would never sleep with anybody before marriage. But even if him and I did sleep together, what makes you think that I'm going to tell you after you literally just slapped the shit out of me? Cornball. Hell's wrong with you? So I deny it all, he slaps me again. I'm not gonna go into too much of the physical shit that went on, you know, because it's very graphic. But he accuses me of being a slut, a whore. And then he goes, oh, you're the bitch of the group. Like, what the fuck? What does that mean? So then he told me to get out and walk my ass to school. So I ran a whole mile to my school. When now that I think about it, I literally just should have not went to school. But I wanted to see my boyfriend. So as soon as I got into the building, I went and I looked for him. And whenever I got there, his reaction was not the reaction that I was expecting at all after I told him what had happened. Like, I wanted to feel protected by my significant other just as anybody else would, but instead he acted very nonchalant about what my dad did, and he really just made it known that he didn't give a fuck. Yeah, he made it known that he literally could give two fucks about what happened to me. So now I'm just feeling even more alone than I felt before. When I got home from school that day, I sat in the car with my dad, and he proceeded to beat me up again. And then he literally took me to an empty parking lot and threatened to leave me there. Now that was the least of my worries, okay? Which I know sounds weird, but hear me out. I wasn't worried about the beatings. I was worried about if my dad was gonna force me to marry some asshole guy just because of this whole situation. So you know, then my dad decides to embarrass me and beat me in public, but no one had the balls, I guess, to say anything to him about it. After that whole situation, I stole my grandpa's antidepressant and I ate about 6 or 7 of the pills. The next thing I knew, I was puking my guts out and I couldn't stand up straight. Literally as a result of this, my dad took me to go get 3 pregnancy tests because he did not believe that I was just sick. And then he obviously took me to go and get a drug test, which everything came back negative, but he still was not convinced. After 2 weeks of all this mental torture, I finally decided to tell my dad that I was not going to live with him anymore and that I wanted to live with my mother. But the issue was I couldn't leave my dad's until I finished my classes so that way I could get transferred. After it was decided that I was going to be moving back with my mother, my dad's language and complete attitude just changed towards me. He started using more harsh words with me. He literally even referred to me as a prostitute, like his own daughter. But in the mix of doing all these things, my dad wakes me up at 3 in the morning and he's crying, begging me not to go, trying to manipulate me, trying to guilt trip me into staying. Oh my god, so sad. Not really. Go fucking cry about it somewhere else. Like, I don't want to hear that shit. Rather listen to nails on a chalkboard. Like, I just don't understand. You beat me, you refer to me as a prostitute, and you don't acknowledge that I'm not mentally okay? Makes sense. Also, the fact that I have to care for myself as a child. I was trapped in a bedroom all day. I could barely sleep at night. So anyways, about 2 or 3 months later, I moved in with my mom of June of 2021. I was 15 years old with severe anxiety, all while weighing 49 kg, which is 108 pounds. And after I realized how bad my dad manipulated me into telling him stuff about my mom, which was shit that was meant to be kept private, my grandma did like this black magic shit on me to eliminate memories of my mother from my childhood. So whatever my mom tells me about things that have happened in my childhood where she was there, I don't remember any of it. I only know what she tells me. Like, she could literally tell me, oh yeah, like you tried to jump off a bridge and I saved you. I'd be like, oh, really? You would think I would remember that. Well, it is soon going to be a year since I moved in with my mother. I gained a tremendous amount of weight, but happy weight. I've gained happy weight. I still get nightmares, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night screaming. My relationship with my mother is better, but it's not the best because she still makes comments about my mental health. I'm also working on my relationship with my sister because that's still a little bit rocky. But I'm pushing myself to do extremely good in school, like really good. So that way I can finally be independent and get my ass out of that fucked up environment. Like, sis needs to heal. This is gonna take years of healing. And the sooner I get the hell out of there, the sooner I can start my healing process. I need to protect my peace. Okay, everybody, that is the end of today's story time. If you guys like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of me, maybe hit that subscribe button down below. And if you want to know whenever I post my next YouTube video, make sure to click that bell. And if you want to send in your anonymous story time, or you want to know how to send in your anonymous story time, make sure to click the link down below in the description. But without further ado, I will see you guys in the next story time.